A lot has happened in the video game industry since 2004. That's all but one Call of Duty game, every Assassin's Creed game. Nintendo have been through 3 home consoles and 2 handhelds. We've seen the fall, the rise, the fall, and maybe the rise of the Sonic franchise. And we've also seen a few Metroid games in that time. Mostly 3D ones though, not that that's a bad thing, but the last traditional side-scrolling 2D Metroid game was a good 13 years ago. Even further back if we're not counting remakes. When you're stuck waiting for that length of time, you get the sense that Nintendo have moved on and that they have other plans. Maybe games like Other M and Federation Force were more important than we first thought. Otherwise, how else would Nintendo go back to their roots? But what the hell does that mean? I heard it a lot when Sonic Mania came out, and I'm sure every review under the sun of Metroid Samus Returns will rattle off the same spiel of Nintendo finally going back to their roots of Metroid after so many years out. But I feel like that undercuts the Prime series, which made a great transition into 3D without compromising a lot of the core features that define a Metroid game. I always saw it as a split between exploration and platforming, with the 3D games being pretty damn good at the former. Even so, the side-scrolling Metroid games were wonderfully non-linear. Getting from point A to point B was possible from a variety of different angles, and the scope for sequence breaking was off the scale. More of that would be cool. Nintendo agreed. To such an extent that they decided to show off their reinvigorated passion for Metroid by remaking one of the worst games in the series before the last half a dozen years. Honestly, I feel like it suffers from the same problem as the first game, but a bit more severely. Age and massive improvements to movement options have left Metroid 1 and 2 lacking the kind of timeless features of other games. Metroid 2 has the added problem of being on a handheld, and squeezing this kind of game that encourages exploration into a Game Boy, that's a hard task for anyone. Remaking Metroid 2 at this point is a very smart idea, since you get a direct comparison to show how far the series has come, and as an entry point for a new player, Metroid 2 has the simplest plot you could ever ask for. What are you doing? Killing all the Metroids on this planet. What's the win condition? Killing every Metroid on this planet. How do you lose? By not killing every Metroid on this... You get the idea. I mean, Metroid games never had particularly complicated stories, but if all of this lore in the background was a turn-off before, Metroid Samus Returns pretty much plops you down on a planet after a brief bit of story, and tells you to go kill some things. Gameplay working with story and all that juicy stuff, but despite a simplistic plot, one thing that isn't sacrificed is atmosphere. Most Metroid games have known when to use the premise of wandering around a hostile alien planet to make the player feel so very alone, something that was unfortunately missing a bit from the original Metroid 2 because the Game Boy can only do so much. I don't want to hark on about it too much, but the music in this game is terrible. I can tell that the beeps and boops were meant to sound atmospheric, but 8-bit music laid out this way sounds a little unfinished. Not so much the case with Samus Returns, where you've got a fully scored soundtrack accompanying unsettling environments with the right kind of music. It makes it all the sweeter when you get to certain areas where the music picks up and drives you forward. This kind of stuff is very important. But not quite as important as the new abilities that this game brings to Samus's arsenal. For a start, you've got a 2D Metroid game with most of the techniques that were gradually given to Samus with every new game. Not the weapon and suit upgrades, you still need to find those. I mean the special stuff that Samus can do with these upgrades. So you can wall jump, bomb jump, and grab on ledges, but I'm not sure you can Shine Spark or Crystal Flash, so I guess you can't have everything. However, you can have some new things, and Samus Returns shakes things up a bit by giving you a melee attack, 360 degrees of aiming, and these weird superpowers. The melee attack is primarily used as a counter to enemies that rush you down, multi-directional aiming gives you a lot more control over where you're shooting, and the superpowers are pretty weird. Mostly the Aeon abilities are used as a crutch to lean on if things are proving a bit too much for you. There are exceptions where, say, you need to activate the lightning armor to get through an area unscathed because you wouldn't have enough health to burn, but generally with all these new features, they are optional in some shape or form. So for anyone who thought that being able to counter enemy attacks would make the game too easy, you can get by without it. You can just not use it. Though, a word of warning, Samus Returns is designed in a way where these new abilities are optional, but the game has still been built around them. So, you've got a counterattack now? Well, we'll just make it so that there's loads of enemies that just throw themselves at you. My favourite is not using the multi-direction aim, because you're playing a game built around being able to snap your aim to anything on screen in an instance with 4 directions of aim instead. I mean, this game has 2 separate hard modes, one of which is locked behind an amiibo, but it doesn't take too much imagination to make your own stipulation. Still, something like the Aeon abilities offer up a good solution to having the game appeal to gamers of all skill sets, like how you can use the scan pulse to reveal hidden breakable blocks in the area around you. It's a hell of a cliche, but things like this make me feel like Samus Returns was made to cater to everyone. Sure, it gets hard at points, and I feel like these advanced combat options open the floodgates for Nintendo to fill later rooms with so many enemies, but it never felt too unfair. I haven't tried any of the hard modes yet though, so maybe they get a little ridiculous. I think the biggest battle here was getting this game made in the first place. Confidence in Metroid as a marketable brand had to have been at an all-time low after a couple of rotten entries into the franchise. And so even with a talented team of designers all working to make the kind of game that we haven't seen for over a decade, there would still be an element of doubt. I feel like once we got there though, it wasn't that hard to make this game, especially since it was a remake. The Metroid formula is so well understood by so many people out there. Non-linear exploration of an alien planet with a heavy focus on platforming, or shooting, depending on perspective. Like, even indie games have started to gain prevalence from emulating these ideas. Seeing it in a Metroid game once again is very satisfying, as is the fact that it's a surprisingly lengthy game for the genre. Certainly on the first playthrough, you may struggle to keep your clear time under 10 hours, just because there's quite a bit of content and the difficulty curve gets a tad steep at points. You could argue that Samus Returns is playing it a little safe by keeping things simple and by having few major additions, but it allows for this quality of level design to really shine through. What additions are introduced do make the game easier, but only because you've got more control than ever before. When you get the hang of timing the counters and getting the muscle memory down for the 360 degrees aiming, you feel awesome when killing enemies. That's all I ask really, and for everyone to buy this game, because Yoshio Sakamoto, the producer behind Samus Returns, says that good sales will see another 2D Metroid game in the future. You have your objective, world. Don't let me down. Thanks for watching, and thank you to Nintendo for sending me the review copy. Take care, guys.